Hello and welcome to our webinar on Specright Network. Really appreciate everybody joining today. Hopefully you learned some new information and ultimately see how you can potentially revolutionize the way you work with your supply chain partners. So appreciate everybody joining us today and really appreciate especially Ann Mao, who is joining us from Gauge USA. She is the Director of Customer Experience and is going to do a Q&A with us at the end about her thoughts on the Specright network. And as a Specright customer and a packaging supplier, I think she has some great ideas on the potential benefits and not only how she and her company can utilize Specright Network, but also how her customers can benefit from the tool. Also joining us today is Ravi Gandhi, who's our Director of Product at Specright. He has been the brains behind much of Specright Network, so it'll be great to hear from him. And then I am Adam Armstrong. I'm our VP of Strategic Partnerships. I've been at Specright for 6 years in a few different roles, and I'm really excited about what the future holds with Specright Network especially. So quick agenda for the webinar. We're going to start off with some background on the evolution of supply chains, then jump into some information on Specright Network. That is what all of you came here for. And then ultimately, Ravi is going to drive a live demo of the product so you can see what is going to be available to all of you shortly. And then finally, the best part, we will speak with Ann about some customer insights and ask her a couple questions. So with that, I'm going to jump into some background on supply chains and the evolution over the last several decades. Many of you are certainly familiar with this, and many of you are probably much more experts than myself on it. But as you can see here, in the 1970s, there was a direct relationship between suppliers and wholesales and the wholesalers and the stores that they distributed to. And so it was relatively low complexity and it worked for the time. In the 80s, there was a rationalization and distribution centers began to grow. And this was a very effective model and certainly increased the efficiency in the supply chain. But ultimately, in the 90s, global sourcing really rose. And this introduced new parties into the supply chain and really increased the complexity. And many of these companies were realizing economies of scale with these new partners. But where it really became the most complex is what we've seen in the last 20 years, certainly driven by e-commerce and a number of other factors. But as you can see in the bottom right graphic, there are a number of different players that are in each and every one of your supply chains. And that means a lot of data collaboration. This increased complexity has brought about many macro efficiencies, but the data administration often suffers in these scenarios. It requires extra work to maintain, and it often leads to a broken game of telephone between these parties. And I think many of you know what I'm talking about, but in terms of communication and collaboration, especially when you get, potentially 2 or more levels down from your direct contacts in the supply chain, there's often inaccurate data or just becomes more difficult to collaborate. So, what has that led to, and what do we think the potential solution is for that? I'm going to talk about the Specright network in a minute, but for those of you that are not as familiar with Specright or specification management in general, you may be asking, what is a specification? And to us, a specification could be the details, the attributes of many things. Certainly that is packaging, which was our genesis. Certainly that's other raw materials, finished products, components and parts that go into a product, the machinery that's involved in all of this process, all of those have specifications. And specification management is a way to manage that information digitally in a software tool like Specright. Many of our customers have been engaging, for years in supplier and customer collaboration inside of Specright, but in a one-to-one scenario. And each year we have a user group, and at that user group we have all of our customers as well as many potential Specright customers as well, and just various members of the ecosystem. And one of our customers asked, if our suppliers and retailers are on Specright, can we just instantly push data to them? And the answer at the time was kind of. There is a way with the communities within Specright that you can collaborate with your suppliers and your retailers and your customers, but ultimately that's a one-to-one relationship. And that was the genesis of Specright Network, because we realized it should be a lot easier. And we were noticing that more and more of the companies that we worked with were working with each other. And so we felt that it made sense to make a way that all of you can collaborate with each other and hopefully find a way to foster even more relationships and even a better ecosystem in this community. So what is the Specright Network? With the Specright Network, it's really a way to drive value for all parties through a spec-first approach to connected supply chains. So whether you're a material supplier, a contract manufacturer, a brand that is purchasing packaging or raw materials or ingredients, or maybe you're a retailer or an e-commerce platform, and you need to be part of this information communication ecosystem. So with the Specright Network, the first phase, which is what Ravi will demonstrate, is a way to easily publish documents. And so it's really around document sharing. So this could be product catalogs that you as a manufacturer of particular goods want to publish. It could be design guidelines or data standards that you as a brand may have and want to push out to your supplier community. It could be regulatory and QA certifications, documents that you as a manufacturer might have and might be applicable to many of your customers. So rather than communicating on that or sharing it via email, or even sharing it in a one-off scenario inside of a Specright customers org, you can share it with many through the Specright Network. So that's the first phase. There's also within that a way to quickly search for and find new suppliers, or potentially, if you are a supplier, to find a new customer or be found by a new customer. And Ravi will show how some of that happens in the network. Ultimately, though, the second phase, which will be coming out later this year, is a way to collaborate on specifications. And so as you make changes to particular components, or you want to suggest or recommend changes, so ultimately that will be a way that you can collaborate on those specifications with various parties. And the future vision is that there's an environment where you aren't working only on your own data, you're operating on the network level. So you could potentially search among a database of specifications that aren't necessarily created by you, aren't necessarily created by your suppliers even. There's just a set of specifications out there. And it's really the concept of moving from kind of your own source code to open source code, if we look at a technology analogy. And we certainly understand that there are many proprietary items. And so, all of this is going to be share what you want to share, But at the same time, you all know that there's a lot of stock items, there's a lot of information that the greater community could benefit from sharing. And so if that was available, which is what we believe it will be through the network, that can increase efficiency significantly. Finally, talking a little bit about the benefits of the Specright network, and I think you'll hear, a lot more interesting benefits when we talk to Anne after the demo. But these are a few here with supply chain traceability, end-to-end collaboration, and authentication and audits. Around traceability, we all know there's an increased demand for transparency, and so within the network, all changes and edits are tracked within the ledger, and all collaboration can be tracked as well. So you can see those modifications, you can look at a history of specification changes, whether that's to a packaging item, to an ingredient, and all be on the same page. In terms of collaboration, this could be sourcing departments and quality assurance groups that are collecting certifications, and it makes it easier to share those in bulk. It also can enable alerts and updates and notifications when new certifications or documents are uploaded. So, we all know that many of you have to manage a large set of documents, and it'd be a lot easier if you could just have those pushed from the network into the correct places, or when necessary, you could pull those documents from your suppliers. When you talk about collaborating on specifications, you can imagine that there's a scenario where you as a bottle manufacturer may be making a change to the molding of a particular stock bottle. And typically you have to notify each of your customers one-off about those changes. You may have to get some sort of sign-off for that. Within the Specright network, you can do that in bulk, and each of your customers can choose to accept or reject or communicate on those changes. So, it really opens up a scenario where in the future, hopefully the companies that are part of the network can choose from this database of existing specifications, as well as communicate on their existing specs. Finally, as I pass this over to Ravi, do want to remind you that the first phase of this is document sharing, and we want your feedback on the best ways to use the network. The future is around specification collaboration and really increasing efficiency for all. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you, Adam. So one of the most requested use cases that will be addressed by the network is the ability for brands to access the latest version of the product specs from their supplier. So think of packaging specs or ingredient specs. As soon as they are finalized by the supplier, the brands need to get access to those. Even as the suppliers work on a new spec or a revised version of a spec, the brands would have the ability to collaborate with their supplier and gather feedback in one centralized place. When we started designing the spec network, there were a few things that we knew we had to ensure from a technology standpoint. One, the need for complete traceability of all changes happening to a data artifact on the network. The historical data should be immutable. Two, the need for a ledger database that is completely secure and cryptographically verifiable. And above all, the need for a solution to be highly scalable and highly available. For the above reasons, we chose to go with Amazon's Quantum Ledger Database, QLDB. That is the same cutting-edge technology already being trusted by Accenture, Splunk, and the Sage Group. With that, let's jump into the live demo and let's take a look at the document broadcast, which is the first feature of the network that is being rolled out to select clients starting this week. So there are a couple of different ways in which you can access the Specright network, depending on whether you are an existing Specright client or not. Existing customers will access the network just as they would access any other feature of Specright. So it would be a separate tab once they log, these include product catalogs, compliance documents, certificates, artwork templates. And if your category does not really fit any of the existing ones, you can also go with other, and then you can enter the name of the category. You can also narrow down further by keywords, and you can enter, for instance, the name of the document, or a name in the, or a word in the description, the name of the company, or even the city or country that the company is located in. So for instance, I have a filter here on the product catalog, and I can further narrow down the list by typing in a keyword. When I click on the link, you can get to see the details of the document. So on the left-hand side, there is information on the company, which is sharing the doc, as well as some more information on the document itself, such as the name, description, the web link, as well as when the document was last updated. On the right-hand side, you see a viewer, which will show you the file if it is a PDF or an image file. For all other kinds of documents, there will always be a link to download the file. Next, let's take a look at the Share tab. This is where the members of the network will manage what documents they want to share with the network or have already shared with the network. For instance, I already have one document that is shared to the network. Let's go ahead and add another one. So I click on New Document. I'll first select the document type. Let's go with certificate. Enter the document name. I'll enter a description, non-GMO certification for whole grain sample. And then I can also enter a few keywords that will enable easier search. The web link is optional. I'll go ahead and upload the file. So I'll select this image file for the certificate. Take a moment to upload. And that is it. When I click on save, you will notice that the document is uploaded now, but it is in the draft status. So the next thing you would do is go back in and you would change the status to published, mark as current status. And at that point, this document is now shared with all other members of the network. Note that you can also make changes to the document. So let's say I want to upload a new version of the document after a few months. I would go in and I would change the status again to draft mode. And I would then edit the document and make the changes that I need to. So it's very simple to also make updates and make sure that the document that you're sharing is also up to date on the network. The third tab of interest is the Members tab. So this is basically a directory listing of all the members of the Specright network. So you have information such as the company name, the industry, and the address. And if you go into one of these records, you can see that there's more information such as the address, which also links to the Google map, as well as the company website and the contact information of the primary contact of the company's contact. So that was a very quick tour of the document share feature on the network. So in the future releases, we are going to bring features such as targeted sharing, which is sharing resources with specific members instead of the entire network. And later, specification sharing and collaboration, which will simplify how multiple parties can access the latest spec version and collaborate on future versions. That was the demo. Back to you, Adam.
Excellent. Thank you, Ravi. And before we get into a few questions, would love for you to do just a quick introduction of yourself and your experience with Specright.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you again for having me as your guest. My name is Ann Mel. I am the Director of Customer Experience at Gauge USA. I've been in the packaging industry for probably 15 plus years, and I am very excited to be introducing Specright to my company. This platform has allowed us to keep our specifications organized and accurate. And I'll go into a little bit of detail of some of the pain points we've experienced before we implement the Specright.
That sounds great. So first question for you is, what interested you engage in the Specright network, and what feature are you most excited for?
I would say the main thing that interested me in the network is the aspect of a trusted community. I've met you guys over the years, and I have been really impressed and intrigued by the amount of passion and dedication that your company has for standardizing the way we do things. So there definitely is a level of confidence I have within Specright. When it came to having to share information, that's something we just have to do. It's required in any position we're in, no matter what company you are at. But the reality is sharing information is quite scary because you can share the wrong information to the wrong people. So for me, knowing that the network has been developed by the same people I trust really makes it interesting, intriguing, and is what has made me want to say I'm on board with Specright Network. So the feature I am most excited about is the members section. Yes, I know we can share information and so forth, but I've always been the type of person that really wants to connect with other, and not necessarily packaging people, but other people who share the same goals. And the goals that I really focus on is efficiency and delivering results. So for me, it's a little like, if I had to compare it to a LinkedIn group, Specright wins hands down because it goes back to the trust. I know the people have been vetted by Specright who are now members of this network. I feel comfortable sharing my information, sharing my thoughts, and really communicating with this group. Where when I go into LinkedIn, it's really like a wider mix of intentions. So I'm on some groups, and most of the time I find people trying to connect with me because they want a soft lead. It's usually solicitation. So I'm not really interested in dealing with that portion when I want to network. So for me, having Specright vetting the members of the group makes me feel that my information and me being on this network is safe, and it goes really back to the reason why I wanted to look into Specright Network, which is the trusted community.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited for that aspect as well. Digging into a little bit of, kind of your prior state, how have you shared information with customers and manufacturers before Specright?
It is, or can be, very antiquated. A lot of our information was always on spreadsheets, documents. It was sent through email. Email was not encrypted. We did Dropbox, WeTransfer, and we still dabbled in occasional FTP, which is very, very old. So for, again, security, there was none. And there are times where I had people send emails to the wrong customer because they had shared the same name. Most recently, what I found was it wasn't even only Gauge USA as a company, but our other external contacts have the same issues. I had a customer reach out to me last week and asked to FedEx a CD with the artwork that I needed for one of the items we're developing. And I did ask him to send it to me, knowing that there's a chance he may never get it back, because if we lost it, then he would never see the artwork again. So I would say a lot of the ways we have shared information is just very, very old.
I was on mute during that, but I did laugh a couple times because those definitely are some antiquated ways.
I actually said to him, I said, do you have that on a USB drive? And he said, no, this is a CD. And I said, I don't have a CD play. Like, I have no way of putting this in my laptop. So yeah.
Well, hopefully he's on this webinar so he can learn some new ways. And yes. Finally, I can feel some of the pain, and could probably jump to a couple conclusions, but what pain points and business impacts has this way of sharing data caused?
I would definitely say it's a little bit of a trickle effect for, especially for my company, in the sense that if I had walked through, let's say sending one of our specifications to our supplier, it really became like a roll of a dice. It was a gamble. So you'd go onto the server, you look for a file by the search feature, you'd find a document somewhat named, similar to a name that what you're looking for, but there was no version control. So at some point you just give up and you just pick whatever you find, you send it over, and the whole ordeal takes 5 to 10 minutes. But then after you're done doing, sending it over, you're then wondering if you're going to see a recall or a quality issue months from now. So the pain point is, like, while it is time consuming in the beginning to search for the actual document you're trying to share, you end up impacting production, not just your own, but also your customers, because then a product with the wrong specification is developed and shipped out. So while we don't see a lot of it, thank goodness, it is a reality. And that's why being able to share documents on a network that is secure, but also allows us to see the latest version, as well as allows us to see who updated it, is so helpful. On a server, you don't know who put the last file on there, so you don't even know who to reach out to see if they can help. With Specright Network, I can just see who uploaded it, reach out to them, and just get some clarification, and it just seems a lot more efficient.
That was excellent, Anne, and really appreciate you sharing those specific stories, and I think, really highlighting a lot of the benefits of Specright Network, certainly with that transparency and collaboration and ability to network. I think ultimately the hope is that this will increase efficiency and reduce errors, and open up opportunities for a lot of different groups. So really appreciate you joining us. Thank you, Ravi, for the demo, and thank you everybody for joining us today. As we said at the beginning, this is an evolution, and we certainly will be sharing more information on the Specright network as it evolves. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself, aarmstrong@specright.com, and I can route that to anybody that you want to ask the questions to specifically. But we look forward to hearing from you and growing the Specright network with all of you. Thank you. Have a great day.